Hey guys, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to share with you all the books that I read in the month of July. July was a big reading month for me. I completed 13 books, which I think is a record for me, but 5 of them I've already wrapped up. I did a separate wrap up of the Reading Rush books that I read during that week. So you can go ahead and check out that video to see my thoughts on those 5 books. So I still have quite a stack here to talk about because I also took part in the Horror in 24 readathon that went almost the whole month. So I did some books for that, and then I had some books that were not part of any readathon, I just read them. So let's go ahead and get into it. So before I start my wrap up, I do want to mention I had a DNF this month. I DNF'd Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page, and I DNF'd this because I initially started to read it because a really good friend of mine read this and thought it was fun and recommended it. And this is actually her book. And so I started it on audio because I wanted to give it a shot because I really do love The Wizard of Oz, like the movie. And so I thought that this would be like a fun take on that story. Unfortunately, I found it to be kind of boring, to be honest. Once the main character got into Oz, I was just kind of bored. So I decided not to continue it. And I also found out that it's a series, and I just don't feel like doing a whole series centering around this story. So I DNF'd it. So the first book that I completed for the month of July was The Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. And this is a YA book about our main character, Alex, who lost her sister. Her sister was brutally murdered, and she obviously is processing that. And this isn't a spoiler, but Alex commits murder herself. And so a lot of the book is about her kind of grappling with the idea that she enjoyed killing and would probably want to do it again. And then also in the backdrop, you have alternating perspectives, not only from Alex, but from 2 people in her life. A girl that she befriends at her job at a animal rescue, and who is called PK. And then also a boy who, I cannot remember his name, wow, Jack, there we go, who becomes somewhat of a love interest for Alex. So overall, I really liked the book in the sense that it alternated between those 3 perspectives, because the 3 main characters live in, the same world, and they have the same sort of inner circle and things, but they see things very differently. And so I liked seeing that alternate perspective. This book also deals a lot with rape culture, which I think is an important topic for YA teens to read about. It also talks a lot about the way that not only males and females relate to each other, but also females and females. This book touches on slut shaming, which I think is another topic that should be addressed for teens. And though there, like I said, are some violent aspects to this book, I think that overall the messages are really important and are done really well. The only thing about this that I guess kind of struggled with in the end was there were things about Alex in the plot, her plot, that I found to be slightly unbelievable. And the ending, though I think it was a good ending and I liked it, but I also felt like it was a little bit unrealistic, unfortunately. It was a little bit unrealistic, and it felt like it was more kind of a wish fulfillment for the author that things would turn out that way or would end up that way. And I think in real world, unfortunately, it just doesn't happen. So though, like I said, this was dark. It was dark. It deals with dark topics, but topics that I think should be talked about. And the characters were interesting and well written. It's just, like I said, a few aspects of the plot were a little unbelievable, and so they kind of pulled me back a little bit from liking it even more. But still, overall, this was a 4-star read for me. The next book that I completed in July was a reread of one of my favorite books of all time, Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. This is a memoir of Frank McCourt's life growing up in Limerick, Ireland. He grew up under extreme poverty, and it's just about his life experience up until he's, I believe, 18 or 19. So I won't say too much about this because I actually vlogged the whole experience. So again, if you want to see more of my deep thoughts about this, go check out that vlog because I do dive into it a little deeper. But overall, I loved this reread, of course. I love the writing. I think that Frank McCourt just has this gift of his storytelling is very conversational, and I imagine that like if you were to meet Frank McCourt, that this is the way he would tell a story to you, like if you were sitting down with him. So not like overly flowery. It's a little bit, I don't want to say stream of consciousness because it's not, but it does kind of sometimes veer off and like stream of consciousness can do. But it's just very like natural. I don't know how else to describe it, but the writing isn't overly flowery. It's pretty simple. And yeah, I loved this so much. So many great moments in here and some great themes that are covered, dealing with obviously poverty and class, but also religion and things like that. So yeah, I loved this so much, and it was a 5-star read. Okay, so then I completed a book that I started in June. It was a group read I was doing on Instagram, and whew, this book was awesome. The book is Stamped from the Beginning, The Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America by Ibram X. Kendi. This book basically is American history told through, like the subtitle suggests, the idea, like how racism has been incorporated into America since before America even began. And this book was such an important read for me. Definitely the most important book I've read this year. I don't normally annotate my books, but I found myself underlining passages, writing in the margins. There was just so much information, but it's done in a very digestible way. And so it wasn't really dry or boring like you would expect an American history text to be. Like I said, it was very digestible. I really loved that it was easy to read. So what this book basically does, like I said, is it goes through American history from like before the Revolution all the way until basically the present day. And what I really liked about this was the way that Ibram X. Kendi kind of broke it up. He broke the book into 5 parts. In each part, there was a person, like an important historical figure that sort of kind of represented that time period, and in many ways showed the different ways that racism was prevalent in the time, because he basically breaks it down into, there are people that are, they're either assimilationists, they're segregationists, or there are anti-racists. And so he kind of shows throughout history how these people, even these big figures, were at times all of those things, or at least 2 of those things, how they kind of, like, they would often have assimilationist ideas, for example, but would have moments where they showed anti-racism. And so that was really interesting to me. And the 5 people that he used to kind of take us on this tour through history were, let me see if I remember. There was Cotton Mather, Thomas Jefferson, William Lloyd Garrison, W.E. Du Bois, and Angela Davis. So it takes you through history. And yeah, there was so much information in here. There were so many things that I unlearned reading this book, because I don't think it's a secret that when you take an American history class, you're not necessarily getting the full picture, especially when it comes to slavery and the Civil War, that era, and even going into the civil rights movement in the 60s. There were definitely things that we were not taught in history class. And I think that that's really sad that we live in a country where, you know, you think you're learning your history, but you're not. And so books like this are super, super important to read so that you do get the full picture. I definitely walked away from this book wanting to read more. I've never read Angela Davis's work. Now I want to read her work. She is someone that I just wasn't super familiar with, and now I want to learn more. A lot of other authors also, just even like just in fiction, that I haven't read and now want to read after hearing about them in this book. So this book again is a book that you learn a lot, but it also makes you want to go out and seek out even more information. So I highly, highly recommend this if you are trying to read books about anti-racism, or any book where you're trying to get a more accurate depiction of American history. I really do feel that this book is important to read, because you will see our history differently once you've read this book. So yes, I highly recommend this book. It's big, but it's worth the read. Get your pencil and highlighters and sticky tabs ready, because you will find yourself doing a lot of annotating in this. So yes, this was a 5-star book, hands down, awesome. And then the last book that I read that wasn't associated with the Horror in 24 readathon was Paper Girls Volume 6 by Brian K. Vaughan. So I read Volume 5 during the reading rush. And during the reading rush, the way that Volume 5 ended, I was like, I have to get Volume 6 and finish this out and find out what happens. So I did. I ordered Volume 6 and I finished it. And I have to say, this was an enjoyable conclusion to the series. It was a little bit longer than the others. And yeah, there were definitely some panels in here that were super cool in the way that it was kind of broken up on the page and was telling at times 4 different stories at once on one page. I thought that was really cool. I can't really go into the plot because, like I said, this is the 6th volume. You know, it'll give away way too much if I start talking about the plot. But I overall really enjoyed this last installment. I think though I will definitely reread this series because there were definitely parts in it that were confusing, because this deals with a lot with time travel. And so, and kind of like interdimensions even. So you're kind of, it's kind of a crazy sort of concept and can get confusing fast. So I think now that I've completed the series, I would love to go back and revisit it sometime. But yeah, this volume, I liked the way that the series ended. I thought it was very well done, and it was a 4-star read for me. Okay, so now we're going to get into what I read for the Horror in 24 readathon, which went from July 11th until August 3rd, but I didn't go till August 3rd because I read everything I wanted to read, except for one thing. The only thing I didn't read for this that I wanted to was the group read, which was Survivor Song by Paul Tremblay. And the reason I didn't get to that one was because I was going to listen to it on Scribd, but when I went to start listening to it after the reading rush, that was my plan, it said it wasn't available to me until August 2nd. So I'm probably going to listen to it sometime in August. When it's available to me. Otherwise, I would have listened to it the last week of July, but I digress. So there were 7 other challenges that I did and completed. So the first one was to read a book with red on the cover. And for that, I read American Vampire Volume 2 by Scott Snyder, Raphael Albuquerque, and Mateus Santaluco. And this is a book about vampires in America. And what's cool about this series is each volume, I believe, takes you through a different decade. So this particular volume mostly took place in 1930s Las Vegas while the Hoover Dam is being built. And so it was cool to see, because I didn't know, like from a historical perspective, the history behind the Hoover Dam and everything, and kind of how Vegas became Sin City. And so you kind of get that in this you know, vampire story. But yeah, this one was cool. I liked it. The plot is definitely like progressing, going forward. I like where it's going. The artwork is good. There are some panels that were, at times, sometimes the artwork is a little bit, I don't know how to describe it. It's not super focused or super intricate. But then there are panels that I thought were like awesome, like of some of the vampires and things like that I thought were neat. But yeah, I think this is a fun series, and I definitely want to keep going with the series. All in all, I liked it. This one I think I gave 3 stars to, because though I liked the story and I like the artwork, I don't like love it. So hopefully as the series goes, it'll get better and better. Okay, so the next challenge sorry, I'm looking down because I have it written down. The next challenge was to read a haunted house or ghost story. So for that, I decided to do The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters. This is a gothic story about a haunted, or is it haunted or isn't it haunted, house in England. This is during World War II. And it's about this doctor who comes to the house, and the house, I'm trying to remember what it's called, Hundreds Hall. He gets called to Hundreds Hall because one of their servants is ill. And from that visit, he sort of befriends the family and kind of gets into the family. It's a mother, older mother and her 2 older children. And so I think the children are actually, they're like middle-aged. And he quickly discovers that this family, they're having some issues with things happening in the house, and they just seem troubled, and he kind of gets caught up in it. And so this is definitely one of those books where as you're reading it, you're kind of asking the question, like, is this house really haunted, or is it the people are having some sort of mental or, you know, psychological break? Like, which is it? Because you're just not sure. And so that aspect of the story I thought was interesting. Anytime I think you read a book like that, it's just interesting. Now, for me though, the writing in this was a little bit slow. I feel like it took well over 100 pages, and this is like a 500-page book, I think. Yeah, it's about 500 pages. Well over 100 pages. It might have even been 150 pages before you got any sort of supernatural occurrence happening or anything even remotely creepy. The whole first part there was like being introduced to these characters, this doctor, and getting a little bit of background on him, getting a little bit of background on the family and what's going on with them. Because they're a family that at one time was very prominent, had a lot of money, and then after the war, that wasn't the case. They're struggling, they're thinking about having to sell parts of their land because they need money. The house is kind of in disrepair and falling apart. They can't afford to have very many servants anymore, things like that. So there's this whole kind of breakdown happening within this family and this once very beautiful estate, which is a theme in itself, I think, about, you know, so literally the family is breaking down financially, and then on the other side you're like, well, are they also mentally breaking down, or is this house really haunted? So again, it was interesting, but it took a long time to get there. And I think I listened to the audiobook of this, and I think if I hadn't listened to the audiobook, I might have DNF'd it, because I was like, when is something going to happen? And then the other thing that made me kind of meh a little bit was there's a romance in here that I just I did not care about, and I felt like it took up too much time. And although it did kind of bring a sense of drama to the plot, I just wasn't interested. I didn't care. So again, I kind of didn't like that either. Overall, I definitely want to give Sarah Waters a try again. So let me know down below if you've read Sarah Waters, what you think I should read next by her. But this one, it was okay. I gave it 3 stars, but I definitely do want to try some more Sarah Waters, so let me know what I should go with. Okay, the third challenge was to read a book featuring supernatural creatures. So for that, I could have used American Vampire Volume 2, vampires obviously, but I also am going to talk about Goosebumps. You know, I love me my Goosebumps, and this is The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. So mummies are supernatural creatures, right? If they come alive, they're supernatural, right? Because I mean, real mummies are just mummies. So this one is about a boy named Gabe, who is visiting Egypt, and his parents are there. I don't remember why his parents are there. And in typical Goosebumps fashion, his parents just like take off. Like, oh, something came up, we have to go. And he's left with his uncle, who is a scientist, working in one of the pyramids. And so he is there with his uncle and his cousin. Sari, who is kind of a brat, I mean, and basically they get lost in one of the pyramids and it goes from there. And this one was fun. I think it was fun. It was a cool like adventure sort of story. Though I feel like the climax, like the big part that you're like waiting for, happened really, really quickly and almost too quickly. And to me, even like when I read this as a kid, mummies are just not scary to me at all. I don't know, they just don't do anything for me. But I thought that this was a fun story. It was fun. It had, you know, the typical Goosebumps cliffhanger chapters and all that sort of stuff. All the stuff you look for in a Goosebumps book. So yeah, this one was fun. It's definitely not one of my all-time favorites, but it wasn't bad either. So this one was a 3-star read for me. Okay, so the 4th challenge was to read a gothic horror novel. So we're gonna go back for that. I read The Little Stranger. The 5th challenge was to read a favorite childhood spooky story. And though The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb is not one of my favorite Goosebumps books, the Goosebumps series as a whole was favorite for me. So I counted this one for that challenge. And the 6th challenge was to read a psychological horror story. So I could have gone with The Little Stranger again because of the whole question of, is the house haunted or are these people just having psychological issues? But for that, I'm gonna go with Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. In this one, it's about a girl who, when she was a little girl, her family lived in this big old house and they lived there for, I think it was 20 days. And they left, like literally dropped everything, left the house, never returned because her father, her father and her mother, said the house was haunted. They had a horrible experience there and went on to write a book. Her father wrote a book about their experience that became like a huge bestseller, very famous. So her family became well known. The thing is though, our main character Maggie was 5 at the time, doesn't remember any of it. Has very, very, very little memory of what happened when they lived in this house. So then at the beginning of the book, her father passes away and she finds out that this whole time her dad actually still owned the house. And she didn't know that. She thought that they'd sold it or whatever. So now she is the owner of this house and decides to go back there to try to like kind of flip the house, do some updating and stuff, put it on the market and sell it. But also she wants to figure out what happened there. Is the house really haunted? Because part of her thinks this is all a bunch of crap. Like this is all a bunch of bull. My dad made this up to make money. And it basically like, she said, you know, feels it basically ruined her life. So she wants to go back and figure out what really happened there. So this one, the reason I think it has some psychological elements is because of the fact that she has this sort of mental block where she does not remember anything that happened there, very, very little, other than what she's read in the book that her dad wrote. And her parents also just, they don't really talk about it. So there's definitely, it plays with that whole idea that she's returning to this place where she has no memories and slowly things are coming back. And what was really fun about this book was you are in the present day with our main character Maggie and seeing her story, her return to the house, but then alternately, I can't talk. It was flip-flopping between Maggie's present day story and the book. And I thought that the book section was so fun because that's where you got all of the creepy haunted house elements, and there were definitely some parts that were creepy. And there was a part in here that happens, I want to say it's probably three-quarters of the way in, that gave me like goosebumps. And it wasn't because it was like necessarily like a supernatural part of the story. It was just the idea of it was like, oh, like that just gave me the creeps. So it definitely had like the creepy elements that I was looking for, and it was a fun ride. And I would say of the Riley Sager books, I've read all of them. This is probably my new favorite because it took some turns that I liked. The ending I kind of saw coming, but I was still pleasantly surprised by it. And like I said, the horror and like creepy gothic elements were super, super fun in this. So yeah, if you are a fan of Riley Sager and haven't read this, you should definitely check it out. Like I said, it's my new favorite of his books. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I gave it 4 stars. Okay, I think that's it, guys. Those are all the books that I read in the month of July. It was quite a ride. So like I said, go ahead and check out my Reading Rush wrap up if you want to hear about those books that I read during the week of the Reading Rush. And also if you want more in-depth thoughts on my reread of Angela's Ashes, make sure to check out my vlog. I will link them for you. And yeah, other than that, let me know how your reading month went. Was July a good month for you? Was it a bad month for you? I want to know. I want to know. So like I said, this month for me, record breaking. I've never read 13 books in a month before. Granted, some of them were quite short, but still, 13 is 13. Anyway, I hope you guys all had a wonderful month. I hope August treats you well, and I just hope everybody is staying safe, staying sane, and reading lots of great books. So, okay, I'm leaving now. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching. Bye.